With the awards season just around the corner, it's time for another round of speculation and recognition. While I don't follow the ceremony religiously, I still keep an eye on the Oscars and the ultimate winners. For nearly a decade, the Academy has marketed itself as the leading voice for the best films, but every so often an outlier slips into the venue. In no particular order, I've picked out 10 entries through the years that didn't deserve their nominations or awards. Not every film in this list is necessarily bad, but their place at the most prestigious film show of all is rather questionable. Let's dig in. Number 10, The Great Gatsby from 1974. To start, we have an older version of a classic story. Most are well familiar with the modern 2013 remake starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire, but the story has been adapted several times before. The 1974 version was directed by Jack Clayton and written by Francis Ford Coppola. It received very mixed reviews, but ended up taking home the Academy Awards for Best Costume Design and Best Original Score. The aesthetics stood out far more than the story and acting, a trend that persisted for other versions both before and after. The Great Gatsby stands out mainly for the stiff competition at the 1975 show, with wildly successful heavy hitters like The Godfather Part 2, Chinatown, Blazing Saddles, and Murder on the Orient Express. This adaptation feels out of place in the roster, a production with more style than substance. Ironically, close to 50 years later, the Baz Luhrmann version would also receive polarizing reviews, yet it still took the prize for Best Costume Design and Best Production Design. Number 9, Rambo First Blood Part 2. John Rambo is one of the most iconic action heroes of the 1980s, with Sylvester Stallone taking the bruised and battered soldier through many personal conflicts. It was a surprise to see the sequel, First Blood Part 2, land a nomination for Best Sound Editing. The film received negative reviews alongside multiple Razzie Awards, including Worst Picture. It all boils down to a mindless action film that has some entertainment value, but won't leave any lasting impressions. So why was it at the 58th Academy Awards show? To this day, the answer remains unknown. While it was an extremely popular film with general audiences, First Blood Part 2 certainly isn't the best in the series. It's the only entry to be nominated for an Academy Award, when the 1982 original would have been a much better fit. The emotional side of Rambo has been stripped away in the sequel, and the franchise would never reach those same qualities again. In the end, First Blood Part 2 lost out to Back to the Future, which is certainly a much better film. Number 8, Con Air. Nicolas Cage can be a serious actor, but more often than not he can be a wild one. Con Air was one of his early efforts into the action genre, and despite mixed reviews, most audiences had a blast with it. It certainly wasn't taking home any awards for its acting or writing. A simple story of ruthless convicts taking over a transport plane mid-flight and one man's attempt to save his friends and stop their plans. Now, Con Air is a no-holds-barred thrill ride where you can turn your brain off and enjoy the carnage. I even listed it in my top 10 guilty pleasures list a while back. But is it Oscar-worthy material? Not really. It seems the only reason it was nominated for Best Original Song is because it made audiences a bit emotional at the end. A nomination for Best Sound feels a bit more appropriate, but Con Air is mostly just loud noise. Entertaining it may be, but not really deserving of high-end recognition. Number 7, Shakespeare in Love. This historical drama concerning the titular English playwright holds a dark secret. It's a good film, but is it worthy of the coveted Best Picture award? Many would argue no, and it's well documented that Saving Private Ryan should have taken the top prize. The same also goes for Best Actress, with critics feeling that Cate Blanchett should have won over Gwyneth Paltrow. Brazilian audiences were also frustrated that their own nominee, Fernanda Montenegro, was snubbed after her great performance in Central Station. Shakespeare in Love isn't remembered as a classic and tends to slip under the radar over 2 decades after its release. This rabbit hole goes much deeper than I thought. Multiple commentators dug into the story and found that the infamous criminal Harvey Weinstein aggressively lobbied for Shakespeare in Love to win in 1998. Of all the films on this list, Shakespeare in Love certainly feels like the most deceitful. I recommend checking out these videos for the full story of how the show was hijacked that year. Number 6, Pearl Harbor. Michael Bay's productions have had an interesting relationship with the Academy. They have always had strong visual effects, but for the most part they fall on the wrong side of critical reception. Armageddon was his first film to be nominated in 1998 for a total of 4 awards, while also receiving a couple of Razzie nominations along the way. A few years later, it was Pearl Harbor that took the spotlight, being nominated for a total of 4 awards and winning Best Sound Editing. From the moment it was first released, Pearl Harbor was lambasted by audiences and critics alike for its weak writing, bloated length, and insensitive approach to real events. Bad movies can still get nominated for awards, and in the case of Pearl Harbor, strong effects have been attached to a movie that wasn't very respectful of history and attempted to ride the coattails of Titanic. This paradox would continue for Transformers in 2007, but Bay's filmography has not reached the Academy since. Number 5. Shark Tale. The only children's film to make the list, Shark Tale was pitched as the next big thing from DreamWorks after the massive success of Shrek. Released in 2005, it ended up feeling like a lesser version of Finding Nemo, with a litany of flaws. The designs of the characters, the questionable motives of its lead protagonist, and a lot of wasted talent culminated in a highly lackluster production. Some of the most viewed videos on this film dedicate themselves to trashing every element without mercy. Shark Tale is widely regarded as one of the worst films from DreamWorks, and yet it still made its way to the biggest award show in town. The nominees for Best Animated Feature were few and far between that year, but placing Shark Tale on the same level as Shrek 2 and The Incredibles is a massive head-scratcher. When you consider how poorly the film is regarded nearly 20 years later, it had no business being at the Academy Awards. Number 4. Crash. Now we come to perhaps the most polarizing award winner of the bunch. Crash is a story about a range of people who cross paths in modern Los Angeles, often in serious or life-threatening circumstances. The film boasts a large cast with many well-known faces: Don Cheadle, Sandra Bullock, Thandiwe Newton, Terrence Howard, and Michael Pena, to name a few. While Crash was praised on release and placed on many Best of 2004 lists, later retrospectives have placed the film on a much lower level. Commentators now call it shallow and criticize its depictions of racism and other heavy themes. For many moviegoers, it was too on the nose and too melodramatic, with performances that ended up feeling far too over the top for a serious drama. It received 3 out of the 6 awards it was nominated for, including Best Film Editing and Best Original Screenplay. Crash isn't viewed very favourably today, and taking Best Picture from Brokeback Mountain remains one of the Academy's biggest controversies. Number 3. Suicide Squad. Next, we have a very baffling pick from the superhero scene. After rebooting Superman with Man of Steel in 2013, DC and Warner Bros. Desperately tried to catch up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe with their own extended franchise. Thanks to rushed story arcs and a lack of careful planning, the DCEU failed and eventually conceded defeat at the turn of the 2020s. The late 2010s were a rough time for fans, and nothing epitomized this more than David Ayer's Suicide Squad. With very negative reviews and the director disowning the film due to studio interference, Suicide Squad 2016 was ridiculed from top to bottom. Many still consider this muddled ensemble to be the absolute worst of the series, but it did receive an unexpected consolation prize, being nominated for and eventually winning an Academy Award for Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Suicide Squad was competing with only 2 other nominees, A Man Called Ovo and Star Trek Beyond, so the competition wasn't very fierce, but the film still stands as the black sheep of the 89th Academy Awards. Number 2. Bohemian Rhapsody. Musical biopics have received a massive popularity boost in recent years, and many of them have been highly acclaimed. One of these was Bohemian Rhapsody, based on the life and success of Freddie Mercury and the British band Queen. It received solid marks across the board in 2018, but it was soon revealed that lead actor Rami Malek had been lip-syncing the iconic songs. In a musical, that's the most important piece of the package, but the issues didn't stop there. The film's editing was a point of contention for many, with YouTuber Thomas Flight being the most critical of all. Even the film's own editor got involved. These criticisms didn't stop the film from winning 4 awards in film editing, sound mixing, and even Best Actor for Malek. This overzealous result didn't go down well among film buffs and the wider community. Arguably, it was Rocketman starring Taron Egerton that was much more deserving of awards, and while it did win Best Original Song, the Elton John biopic received no other nominations a couple of years later. Number 1. Emilia Perez. Last but certainly not least, we have the new nominee everyone is talking about. This modern release has cooked up a lot of controversy, but also received great reviews with its use of music and rhythm to tell the story. Even big-name directors like Guillermo del Toro have nothing but praise for the production. It's a very unique title, but all the acclaim over this core feature has diluted or dismissed legitimate grievances. In Mexico, the film has been panned across the board. Emilia Perez is considered deeply tone-deaf and insensitive towards their culture and wider filmmaking. A story about Mexico, made by a French director and crew. The discontent has been heightened further by Emilia Perez receiving 13 nominations, driven by an aggressive marketing campaign that led many to brand the film as Oscar bait. How successful Emilia Perez will be at this year's show remains to be seen, but the backlash may impact its prospects. Those were my picks for controversial Oscar nominees in the lead up to this year's show. Did I miss any? Stick your suggestions in the comments below. You can find more top 10 lists like this one on my channel.